DHC talks dedicated to financing innovation in district heating sector. Thank you for being here, and I'd say this is the second month of this series of webinars, and I'm quite glad to say that we are experiencing a very good rate of attendance in these 2 months. So I would like also to thank you, the district heating communities, and all technicals and experts they are following us in these 2 months. My name is Gabriele Pesce, and I will moderate today's discussion. I work for Euroheat and Power, the European Association of District Heating and Cooling, and in particular in the DHC Plus technology platform. I hope that you can see my screen, so I will change. Okay. So the DHC Plus is set up under the umbrella of Euroheat and Power, and it's the European hub for research innovation in the district heating sector. We're a strong group of stakeholders from academia, research, business, industry, committed to move to a sustainable energy system. DHC Plus strategy and final aim is to support its member through a series of activities in order to boost innovation in the sector. So from research and business network support, advocacy and communication, education and training, general networking opportunities, and of course through financing and EU projects. One example is, for example, today, during this webinar, with the help of our experts, we try to understand which is the most interesting source of financing to foster innovation in the sector. But we will do that from a different perspective, I would say. We won't discuss about the dozen, although very important, series of funding program of European institution. We rather focus on some specific examples, very important for the future. Like to say, from some instruments deployed by the European Commission to some very good example of investment and business model to foster innovation in the heating sector. And finally, we will discuss about one of the most alternative financing scheme, like to say, the crowdfunding, that it's emerging as one of the most interesting finance opportunity for the district heating sector. Before we get started, I would like to remark some important point of today. First of all, I want to make this webinar as most interactive as possible. So the first half of the webinar will be dedicated to presentation and slides, and the second half it will be dedicated to debate. So don't be shy, pose your question, ask for your question. We are here to inspire and to debate. How to pose question? On GoToWebinar on the right, you have a panel, so use the chat section, and use the same section also to report any technical issues you may experience during this webinar. One last remark, the webinar is recorded and it will be available on the DHC Plus website very soon, right after the webinar. So, returning to us, why it is important to debate about financing innovation? The answer could be very simple. We need money to develop innovative projects. Actually, the answer is not so simple, so common. Innovation does require a lot of investment. Yet, even as the global community, I'd say, reached a consensus on the urgent need to reduce greenhouse emissions, in particular in the heating sector, the clean energy innovation has been characterized by an endemic shortages of investment. This problem can be largely, I would say, attributed to several characteristics unique to the district heating industry that discourage private investments, and in particular venture capital. long-term return of investment, very high risk, natural monopolies, and very high upfront costs. So anyway, the technical life cycle of an emerging technology, as you can see in the slide, is typically industry neutral and follows a set trajectory. We have a first phase, so the early stage of research, pure research and development. A second phase, demonstration and scaling of the technology. And the third phase, about commercialization of the product and project rollout. So the technological life cycle may lead to premature halt for any number of reasons. So, for example, unsatisfactory results, if cost outweighs benefits, for example, market ups. And so for all these reasons, we need some institutionalized support on the financing side. So a great help comes, of course, from the EU funding programs, who try to cover all these phases through different finance sources. So you can say in the slide, in the first phase, we have Horizon Europe, for example. In the second phase, the Innovation Fund. And in the third phase, all the alternative EIB, for example, scheme and support. So, in this slide, you can see the most relevant upcoming European funding from the next framework program. Of course, negotiations are still ongoing, so we cannot say, we cannot have many details, but this is just to show you how the Commission and the European Union in general is working. So we will have some program dedicated to pure research, such as Horizon Europe, the related partnerships, the LIFE program. Some fund, like the Innovation Fund, dedicated to the demonstration, and other funds dedicated to deployments, like the Moderator Fund and so on. And then a series of, let's say, cross-sectorial or, some instrument that cross all the development phases of innovative technology, like the EIB financial instruments, InvestEU program, and so on. So I hope that today we will have, a better overview of, the work there is behind this public fund. So I already talked too much. I would like to give you the room to our wonderful expert. So we will have Nuno Quental. He works as policy officer in the field of financial instruments in DG Energy. in DG Research Innovation. And Kristina Lygnerud from the Swedish Environmental Institute, and finally Dr. Chiara Candelise, a researcher at the Bocconi University at the Imperial Center for Energy Policy and Technology. So I would like to ask the speaker to switch on the camera if they ready to do that. Okay, welcome. So we in DHC Plus Talks, we have a tradition. So as this want to be like, an opportunity to have like a conversation after lunch, we usually show and grab our favorite mugs, sipping coffee. So for example, mine is this one. It's made by a Scandinavian Danish artist. And it's for me, a very high sentimental value. But in order of agenda, Nuno, can you really quickly present you?
I can show that was produced with a 3D printer.
Wow, really? About innovation.
Sorry to break the rules, but I didn't have a Mac here.
Okay, don't worry. It was very more interesting than that simple Mac. Kristina, can you introduce yourself very quickly, and which is your Mac you have? We can unmute you, Mike. Kristina, maybe we cannot hear you.
But you can see me. So this is my very big coffee mug. I like strong coffee, but not too much. And thank you for having me. I work at the Swedish Environment Research Institute.
Okay, and finally, Kristina, Chiara, can you introduce yourself and show you?
Hi, good morning. This is my mug. It's actually empty.
No.
Because usually I prefer the small coffee, but you asked me to have a mug, so I found a mug, and this is painted by my grandmother, so it's a bit of a personal touch in it. As you said, I'm Chiara Candelise. I'm from Bocconi University, and I'm here because I've been collaborating with the Euroheat and Power for an early assessment of the application of crowdfunding to district heating, and we're going to speak about that later on.
Okay, so I will start with the first presentation. So I ask all the speakers to switch off the camera, and please, Nuno, can you share your screen and present and give us your presentation?
Thank you, Gabriele. Thank you for this introduction. Just to check if you are seeing correctly the screen.
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Perfect. So as you said, so I work for the European Commission in the European Innovation Council Task Force. So it's a unit that is dealing with different financial instruments related to research and innovation. So not with other areas of the Commission, like some of the instruments that you mentioned. You know, I don't work with all of them, as you can imagine, just with some of them, and I will focus on that. You know, even if sometimes I may know something about other instruments as well. I will start with something that is quite, important for us right now, which is the European Innovation Council. I'm sure you heard about it. The European Innovation Council has different parts, different pillars. I will focus on the accelerator because I think it's the most important for you. It's the closest to market. There are other parts, for example, one that is called the Pathfinder. The Pathfinder is for lower TRL projects, but I will not talk about it here. Although it is, of course, it can also be important if you are developing, new ideas and something a bit more groundbreaking. The accelerator is targeting projects, companies that have a very high potential to scale up, and also that are bringing new ideas that should be disruptive or high risk, something that is really bringing a big change in the market, with a very high potential. There is a very important innovation, yes, in the European Innovation Council, which is the fact that we can provide, in addition to grants, up to 2.5 million, as you can see in the slide, we can also provide equity. So this means that the European Commission, through a fund called EIC Fund, that is right now being set up, we can also be investors in these companies, if they are interested, of course. And we can provide up to 15 million euros, which is already quite a substantial amount of money. Usually we are careful not to dilute too much the owner's capital, so there are lots of concerns, so that we never take a majority stake in the companies, and we are not exercising actively our voting rights, for example. Well, voting rights, yes, but not really. We don't take part in management decisions of these companies. So this is quite important for us. There is a substantial amount of money for the IC. I'm sure you've seen also in the future is going to be ramped up even. And usually the IC is really purely bottom up. There is one exception that I will mention immediately afterwards in my next slide. But just to mention to you as well that projects, if in case they are not totally ready, they can also benefit from coaching and mentoring services that we have. The exception for the bottom-up EIC is what we call the Green Deal part of it. So the Green Deal, you can imagine why it was introduced. It was precisely because since von der Leyen became the president, it was a very big impetus of the new commission. And we have developed a specific EIC call, EIC accelerator call dealing with the Green Deal. And this is for projects that really have as their purpose when they are able to deliver impacts, sustainability impacts as defined by the Green Deal communication, if you heard. So that can be, of course, different. You can imagine on, I don't know, in biodiversity, in climate change, climate adaptation, freshwater resources, all these different, environmental services. If a project substantially contributes to one of these services or objectives, it can apply to the specific Green Deal call. which, as you can see, has a deadline already on Tuesday next week. So of course it's late. If you didn't know about it, now it's late in the game. You are late in the game, but we will have every year one cutoff date dedicated to the Green Deal. As you can see, it has also a substantial amount of money. There are other parts of the IC that are also dealing with the Green Deal, but I will not mention it. You can see in the slide some additional information. However, as you can see, the amounts are substantially smaller. The most important part is really this EIC Accelerator Green Deal call. Leaving now the EIC and going to Inofin. Inofin is one of these, as Gabriele mentioned, is one of the EIB, it's a EU instrument financed by the European Commission. It's a guarantee, so the European Commission provides a guarantee, and the European Investment Bank is providing loans to projects that should be demonstrating, innovative technologies related to clean energy. We have a very broad scope right now. We can cover, from really renewables, we can go into batteries, we even finance manufacturing plants of innovative clean energy technologies. Of course, we can finance district heating and cooling as well. Unfortunately, as you will see in the next slide, we don't have any project on district heating and cooling, but we hope, soon over the next years that we can do it, because indeed it's a part that is still missing from our portfolio. Tell me if I'm spending too much time. I don't want to overrun. We have right now 7 projects in our portfolio, but on Monday we will have 8 already. It's really coming very soon. It's going to be actually the biggest project we have. And this building is going to increase substantially also the amounts that you can see in the slide. So this is just a quick view on our portfolio. So we have Northvolt, which is on, you heard about it for sure, a very big gigafactory for batteries. We have a demand response project. We have WindFloat, innovative wind float technology or floating wind in Portugal. We have Greenway, which is about network for charging stations for electrical vehicles. We have a PV manufacturing plant. We have also Alcogen, which is on fuel cells and hydrogen, and Wave Roller, which is, well, it's Portugal and Finland, because it's a demonstration of wave energy, which is taking place in Portugal, but with a Finnish company. And then another instrument that we have created with Breakthrough Energy Ventures, which is a US venture capital fund, where Bill Gates, the famous billionaire, is also involved. Well, it's a small fund for the time being. It's a 100 million euros, 50-50, so between Commission and Breakthrough Energy Ventures. It's already operational, but because it's quite recent, it has no investments made so far. And the main purpose of this, in a way, it's a fund. It's like a venture capital fund. The main goal is to, invest in companies that are developing breakthrough technologies that contribute to climate mitigation in any sector almost. The most important sectors are covered. So let's see. I hope they will invest soon in a company. It can only invest in European companies, although we joined forces with the United States fund. This is a European fund, and it can only invest in European companies, also with approval of European members. We have also developed another fund. There are lots of different funds. This one is targeting circular bioeconomy. It's a bit larger than the other one. It's 250 million. Again, it's a public-private partnership. I think this is also the interesting thing of these funds, is that we are leveraging private capital. And circular economy, I'm not going to explain very well what it is. It can also cover different areas. Again, I think also, both for the previous fund, but also for this circular bioeconomy, I think district heating and cooling could be targeted as well. Maybe for this one would not be possibly the main target. For sure, the previous one could be a very important target, because you can contribute very significantly to climate change mitigation. For circular bioeconomy, maybe less, but you can correct me afterwards. Anyway, it's an important part of our portfolio. Just to give you very quick, overall figures for the Inofin EIB portfolio. I just mentioned a very small portion of the different range of instruments that we have. We have other instruments that are covering maybe less risky projects compared to the ones that I talked about. We have instruments that can cover, really targeting deployment of technologies, and so usually it's, projects that are considered of a lesser risk. So that's why I didn't enter into that. But when you look at the overall EIB portfolio of Innofin, you will see that projects contributing to climate action and energy efficiency comprise around 1/4 already. And the IB, of course, they want to ramp up because now they are considered, or they will be considered climate bank, and they will need to, increase this share to 50% of their entire portfolio, not only Innofin, but the entire EIB portfolio. So they will have, a lot to do on this. InvestEU, I will talk afterwards, so I will not mention it for now. So Gabriele already mentioned it, and it will really, come to the end of my presentation. I think I should be already more or less about the time. So the InvestEU will take over on different existing financial instruments, FC and Innofin. InvestEU is going to be, a very large range of family of financial instruments that we will have. We are dealing in the GRTD mostly with this research, innovation, and digitalization window. As you can see, there is a budgetary guarantee of 11.25 billion euros. This is, I see it's not, I know, yes, it is written, the scale there. So it's 11.25 billion, which can leverage, it's an estimation of 200 billion. So it's very, very substantial. And then inside, each of these windows, we'll have different products, the most important of which is, at least for us, for our conversation here, is called Green Transition Investment Facility, which is a joint product also with another window, but this is just a detail. This window is going to be, in a way, a successor of these Innofin energy demonstration projects that I mentioned before, but the range of products or areas, sectors is going to be enlarged again. We'll be able to cover as well circular bioeconomy and other projects, basically dealing with the Green Deal. So it's going to be quite a broad instrument, which is going to be very powerful in terms of, we will be able to invest basically in any project that can significantly contribute to the Green Deal, including, of course, district heating and cooling. As you can imagine, we don't have any specific instruments targeting heating and cooling. We have broader instruments that can also invest in your sector. Because it doesn't really make sense, for example, for the IB to have a dedicated product, although it would be too, let's say, too financially demanding for the IB to have a dedicated team only for this type of projects. So, it was a very quick overview. Sorry if I didn't go into a lot of details. I'm happy to provide additional, details if you need. Please bear in mind that when it comes to InvestEU, there are many things that are still to be defined, and therefore there are things that I cannot even talk about, or that I don't even know because it's not yet decided. So thanks so much, and happy to hear the next speakers as well.
Thank you, Nuno. I say that it was a very interesting presentation. I have to say that district heating sector in general focuses a lot of industrial technology, engineering, and very few on this financing scheme and opportunities. And in my experience, I always try to foster and to disseminate the existence of this kind of programs and schemes, because everyone knows Horizon Europe, Horizon 2020, but few people, I have to say, in industry knows the opportunities coming from, for example, the EIC and the former SME instruments, and above all, that would be very useful for startups, even in district heating and cooling sector, in particular in the sector of digitalization and so on. So thank you, really, Nuno. So we will have question session after the other two presentations. So please flag your question, and we will have the opportunity to pose all the questions you want to Nuno right after the other two presentations. So now I would like to give the floor to Kristina. So she will give us a very good overview about projects which we are also partners, so we are quite proud to present it. So Kristina, it's your turn. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'm here today because I am the coordinator of the Reuse Heat project, which is a large project on district heating, and we focus in the new technology where you have lower temperatures in the system called fourth generation. And in this context, we see a lot of challenges for business models, contracts, and investments, and I will share some of our main conclusions. Yes, and again, if you need to contact me, you reach me at my email address here below. Please feel free to do so. Yes, so from the Reuse Heat project, we have some experiences. We have been active since October 2017, and to date, we have identified that there is a large interest amongst investors to actually invest in the sector. But then again, it does not seem that the investors and the district heating sector fully speak the same language. A better understanding is needed. And we have some ideas on ways forward to the financing solution for the sector. So these are my 3 points. First, shortly, the Reuse Heat project, the vision is that the future city can more or less heat itself because people live in the city and move around and thereby generate energy. For example, there is energy in the sewage water, there is energy from the infrastructure of transportation, like the metro system, there is heat from public buildings like hospitals, and there is also a large volume to recover from data centers. And we have these 4 demo sites, and we are going to demonstrate them in 4 different cities in Europe. But we are not only focusing then on the technical side. Let's see if my picture changes. Yes, great. So we have also started to analyze what happens if we start to actually tap this potential of heat, what happens in the national grid, what happens locally. And we have done a very big stakeholder analysis with the people from 8 countries in Europe, 76 respondents, to understand who is interested in our solution. And we have also drafted business model concepts and contracts for our 4 demo sites, and we have made some general conclusions on barriers and facilitators and risk. And we have also developed an idea on how to make the investments bankable. So, going to my first point, there seems to be interest to invest in the sector. And that makes complete sense because the people who are into green financing are looking for sustainable development projects or initiatives. And the district heating and cooling sector provide sustainable projects, and they are a sector that should be expanded. We have a strategy from the European Commission for heating and cooling, and it's a sector that has a very big role to play in the decarbonisation of Europe. So there should be a match here. Let's see. Yes, now it shifted. And we have one good quote from our stakeholder interviews, and it is that we don't lack money, but we lack good projects to lend money to. And it was one of our bankers who said this in one of our interviews. So we know there is interest. But then when we start to talk to investors and scratch on the surface, we realize that they all apply conventional KPIs for investments like net present value, internal rate of return, payback time, preferably 3 years, and large-sized investments, 5 million euro or more. So that means that the value of green is a good to have, but it's not really the one that decides on the investment. We have also realized on the investor side that many investors have not previously invested in district heating and cooling, and that means that they don't know what they are investing in. So this is why you get questions on payback. If you invest in something with a 40-year payback and you usually have a 3-year payback, of course you will question if this is a good investment or not. If you don't know the sector, you will wonder what the risk is. And if you don't know what the risk is, you will add additional risk premia on top of your required return in order to make the investment. And then we also saw in our stakeholder interviews that we don't really have a clear legal framework around waste heat overall, and this kind of waste heat in particular in Europe, making the urban and future district heating investment difficult to put in a box. You can put solar in a box, you can put other renewables in boxes, but you can't really put the urban waste heat recovery in a box and tick it off. And then we see that what is established and has been there for a long time, of course, competes with the funds because it lowers the risk of the investor. So on the one hand side, you have the investor who is interested, but doesn't really know what kind of baby they are looking at. And on the other hand side, you have the sector that wants to expand. There is great opportunity for that, but they don't really know who to address and what to prepare in order to be seen and heard. Which takes us to the last point I want to make. So the financing innovations in district heating and cooling are probably not so much about finding new tools or methods or new ways of deriving green bonds, but it's more concrete than that. So you have the language barrier between the investor and the industry, which you need to kind of overcome. And then the value of green, it is increasingly important. And in 2050, when you have no alternatives, there are no fossil fuels, nothing, the value of green will be a sanity factor. It's no longer a good to have, but it's a must. So to capitalize already now on that in a long-term investment is probably a clever investment. And then the really large investors, they want to make big investments. And this is something we talked about in many contexts. For example, we have a project called Reward Heat when we look at 8 different demo sites of future district heating technology, and they are all small. And in that project, we will try to bundle the projects into one portfolio that can be offered to a large investor. But in discussions with EIB and EBRD, we have already identified that this kind of structure is probably difficult because you have different legal circumstances and different legal regulations to account for, and who will then take the risk of such a portfolio. At the same time as we think about this bundling, we have also seen that there is an interest on the local level for local energy solutions. And for example, in Germany, there are investors now that go to the demand side, the end user, and ask them, what kind of energy solution would you like? And often the answer is then a green solution that is local, and the crowdfunding comes in and you get these local pop-ups. So maybe this is one part of the puzzle for solving the unlocking of finance to the sector. Yes, and those were my messages. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kristina. I like the quote you show us. I think that, yeah, there's not so much lack about good projects. I think that there is more a lack of matching between good projects and financing opportunities, but we have time to debate about that. As the time is running out, I would like to give you immediately the floor to Dr. Chiara Candelise from Bocconi University, that she will speak about crowdfunding, as already mentioned by Kristina, as one of the most interesting emerging financing tool for district heating and cooling. So please, Chiara, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you, yeah.
And can you see my screen, just to be sure that...
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, thank you for introduction. Shall we launch the poll just quickly?
Yeah, Chiara has some question for the audience, so please, if you can launch the poll. So how is your mind? Have you heard Have you heard about crowdfunding in the energy sector? Yes, I heard about crowdfunding, but not in the energy sector, and never heard about crowdfunding. So please reply. You have 30 seconds. So yeah, maybe we heard about crowdfunding for a lot of different business, but it's quite unique for district heating. But there are some examples. So I think the surveys end. So yeah, of course, a good share of the attendee not heard about crowdfunding, but not in the energy sector. So quite interesting. So it's I think the Chiara Candelise's presentation will be quite interesting for the audience. Okay, I'm glad to see that at least all the attendees know about crowdfunding. So please, Chiara, you can share your presentation.
Okay, so thank you for that. So it's good to know that. So next slide. How can I, sorry, okay. So next slide, the first slide is about what is crowdfunding. So I will quickly go through it because as we just found out, everyone knows about it. We know it's an alternative finance tool. We know that this works through dedicated web platforms. What is important to highlight here is the fact that, which I think is relevant for its application to energy, is the fact that especially for the people that invest through crowdfunding is a way to investing, to choosing where to put their money with no intermediation and with full transparency, which means that they get to know a lot about the projects they are investing into. There are different crowdfunding models. I'll go through them very, very quickly. We can divide them in two categories: non-financial, so like the donation and the reward-based crowdfunding, and the financial crowdfunding, which is the two main forms are equity and lending. The main difference is that in the financial models, people give money to get some sort of returns back, and they can be in the form of equity or, as I said, in the form of lending. Let's move on to the crowdfunding in the energy sector. In the energy sector, the majority of the crowdfunding platform dedicated to energy are financial models, either lending or equity. It's the application of crowdfunding to the energy sector is fairly new, so that's probably why you never heard about it. The first platform have been founded in 2012. I can show you some data in terms of growing funding volumes since then. The last updated survey of the use of crowdfunding in energy is up to the end of 2017, so a couple of years ago. Back then, we had in overall around the world, but the majority is in Europe, we had over 800 projects funded for a total of over 3 million euros of funding volume. Just to give an idea of how has been developing since then, if you take Abundance Generation, which is the biggest platform in the UK. Since then, they've been developing 11 projects for an average size of funding of the project of over almost £3 million. Just to give a quick context of where we are. So we all know we are going through an energy transition. So we are moving from large and fossil fuel generation towards smaller distributed renewables, as those that we see in these pictures, which implies, sorry, a bit slow, which implies that this transformation of the energy sector, which has gone through liberalization of the energy markets, as we said, transition toward cleaner energy systems and decentralized generation, has implied that the investments in energy are smaller and more modular. The generation is getting closer to the point of consumption. So we all know about the role of prosumer coming up. So the consumer are coming much closer to the production. So we have situations like those that we see in this picture. So, and we also know that there are since the liberalization of the energy markets, we have new players coming into the energy sector, including citizens and local authorities and smaller firms. So this, in this context, we've seen the emergence of energy communities, which are initiatives where citizens engage themselves in the developments of clean energy projects. They invest in those projects, and as doing that, they earn money out of that, but they also contribute to reducing CO2 emission reduction. And this concept has been used already for district heating. Energy communities, especially in the form of cooperatives, have been developed to manage district heating systems, and those systems are owned by their own customers. For example, in Denmark, out of these are data of 2018, out of 430 Danish district heating systems, 340 are operated by cooperatives. By customers, basically. Going back to crowdfunding, the use of crowdfunding in the energy sector, the projects developed and funded through crowdfunding are all renewables. And for the first, up to 2017, let's say 18, the majority of the projects were on PV and wind, what we could call the low-hanging fruits in the energy system. But we can see a progressive differentiation of technology. So here you see the data, the number of projects per technology in the countries where crowdfunding is more developed. So if, for example, if you look at the United Kingdom, you see that in the latest year, there has been a differentiation of technology. So from wind and PV, we're starting to see projects in biomass, also less mature technologies like ocean energy, tidal, geothermal, so a progressive, let's say, improvement in terms of diversity of technology in the sector. So just to recap, what are the main possible benefits of the use of crowdfunding as a source of funding for energy projects? So for the developers, for sure is a finance instrument. So it's a way to access capital. A recent European project that has been surveying views from developers using crowdfunding to finance energy projects found out that their response was that using crowdfunding is an easier and possibly more timely access to finance, and in some cases even cheaper than traditional finance. And the other very important element is the engagement. So crowdfunding platform can help in improving the visibility of the project, in increasing local consent, because in some ways also through crowdfunding, as through energy communities and cooperatives, you can allow people to invest in those projects and earn out of that. So in a way, it's also a way to redistribute revenues and royalties to the territories which are interested by the investment itself. In some cases can help in reducing potential NIMBYism and therefore increase, as I said, local consent. And in some cases, this can help in reducing the planning risk as well for the developers. So what are the motivations to invest? So as I said, it's a fairly new sector. The same project that I mentioned before has done an initial survey through investors, through citizens that have been investing in crowdfunding projects in the energy sector. And what you see here is the result of that survey. So the question is why you invest, what are the main reasons why you invested through crowdfunding? And as you can see, transparency is one of the main reasons why people invest, and of course the expected rate of return and the sustainability impact. So to summarize, looks like people invest in crowdfunding projects because they can choose where they can put their money, and they decide to put their money on something which is sustainable. And of course they're interested also in the returns that they can get out of that. So a couple of slides on what we started on our initial attempt, let's say, to see how crowdfunding could help district heating and financing district heating. And some of these issues have been also mentioned by Kristina before. So looking at the access to finance point of view, some of the challenges of district heating are in terms of accessing finance are related to the fact that some projects are small, and so the traditional finance don't go there, and the crowdfunding definitely can help in that, both in terms of both the equity model and the lending model. The equity model can also help in raising equity and making possibly easier to access bank loans, therefore more traditional finance. And also the other point that has been also mentioned is the fact that some of those projects have longer payback time with implicit lower internal rate of return. And it's possible that crowd investors, because they know, they decide to put their money in that project because they also see other benefits apart from the return on the investment, they might be prepared to invest money in what we can call the patient capital. So a capital that have no expectation of immediate high return, but is willing to invest because also see the potential in terms of social and environmental impacts on their territories, for example. And the other element is the public engagement. It looks like that district heating business case is made more sustainable if there is a stronger involvement of customers for different reasons. First of all, and crowdfunding can help in that, because crowdfunding, as I said, is a way to raise capital, but is also a very powerful tool to communicate the project and to let people know about the project. So it can help, therefore, to increase the awareness and the potential negative perception of the project by the citizens, in particular the citizens that are local and to the area where the project is going to be implemented. It could potentially help, again, by engaging citizens through communication. Crowdfunding could help in minimizing the impact of energy demand risk on the profitability of the investment. So in a way, you could use crowdfunding to involve citizens in the developments at the development stage of the project. And in that way, you could have a minimum, you could get a minimum number of connections guaranteed by citizens before or while developing the project. Of course, it can help, again, by increasing public awareness, acceptance, and the number of customer connections. It can help in increasing the economy of scale of the project. It can definitely reduce the potential NIMBYs, as I said before, because first of all, you communicate the project, you increase awareness, you allow redistribution of economic returns on the territory, and therefore, potentially you help against NIMBYs. And you could help potentially also in terms of planning risks. Again, if you increase local engagement, if you increase local awareness, if you increase participation of the local people, you might have better chances in planning processes. And I'll thank you, and I'll leave it there, because all these issues that I raised are really open to discussion.
Thank you very much, Chiara. I say that, okay, time is running out. Now it's time to the audience. We have already some questions, so I kindly ask to the speakers to switch on the cameras, so to have a more interactive way to interact with the audience. Okay. So thank you again for your presentation. So I would very quickly go to some questions. I would prioritize the most general ones. So we have a first question for Kristina. Kristina, thank you for, I'm reading. Thank you for a great and interesting presentation. Do you see any differences regarding use of financial market investment instruments between public owned district heating system compared to privately owned?
So thank you. I think that ownership in the district heating investment is very relevant to discuss, because in some countries you have a public tradition like Sweden, where I come from, and in other countries it's more of a private market, or you have a concession model. So of course, depending on the ownership preferences, you will have differences. However, I think there is a development where you see that you can combine the two. There is an example in Denmark, and you mentioned, Chiara, the Patient's Capital, where you have a municipal energy company, and you have a producer of food, and there is waste heat from the food producer, and the food producer is used to a payback in all investments of about 3 years, whereas the district heating company can wait for like 20, 30 years. And they made an arrangement so the investment was paid back sooner to the private party than the public party. And then once the private party was satisfied and the risks were eliminated, then the patient's capital could kick in. I'm not sure it's completely an answer to your question, but that's what's coming to my mind.
Anyone of you wants to add anything to Kristina's reply, or Chiara or Nuno? I don't know. Chiara, you want to add anything? Differences between, you know, public and private? Yeah, please.
No. What's the? Can you? I was sorry. It's different between financial instruments to finance public owned or privately owned.
Yeah, any difference exactly? Financial market investment.
Well, from a, let's say, from a crowdfunding point of view, what I could say is that potentially for projects, I'm not a district heating specialist, but what I understood is that you might need public-owned, public intervention, let's say, especially in those projects which have lower internal rate of return, longer payback time, and potentially higher social and environmental impacts. So accounting for that, I would see crowdfunding to fit very well for those type of projects, for the reason I mentioned, and also because the public authority themselves might be interested in gain visibility through the crowdfunding projects with their territories. Not sure if this adds to the discussion, but yeah.
For sure. Okay, thank you. And now a question for Nuno. I don't know if you can read it. I can read it for you. Okay, a lot of instruments are developed for service product system providers. Which instruments would be suitable for the need owners? For example, publicly owned utilities investing into innovative greenhouse gases avoidance systems. You know,
well, for us, you know, we don't really distinguish in our instruments so much about public or private entities. Of course, most of the times we are talking about private entities, but not only. For example, we have an instrument that really is targeting research and development initiatives by member states when they need. For example, we have already financed in Portugal and Poland. So in many cases, we can also finance public companies. The question for us is really if there is a risk, if there is a market failure that justifies. Of course, you could say that no, but a public company in principle is able to go to the markets or is able to, you know, through governmental or through their fees or the taxes and that the customers are paying, they will be able to raise enough funds. Yeah, but not always, because many times even public companies, you know, the revenues they have are totally committed to investments. So if they want to invest in an innovative project, they can still face difficulties and they may still require additional funding in this case from us. And when you are asking so about instruments, you know, I would say, in fact, most of the instruments that we have could be applicable. As I said, in case there is a market failure, in case the project is risky enough, for example, Affinity people could perfectly support a public company, a public utility. And, you know, all the other instruments that you mentioned, for example, Innovation Fund, it will be possible. It doesn't exist yet, but there will be in July, I think, more or less. There will be the first call of the innovation fund. I don't know if you were aware, but will be launched. So I think it's important to keep that in mind, because indeed it's quite important for your community. So check that. And then I would mention as well, in Horizon 2020, and then in the future in Horizon Europe, we have many public companies. If you do a search in Cordis, for example, you will find. And this we're talking about grants. So even grants, that is totally supported by the EU, and of course they don't have to be paid back. Even there, in this type of projects, we have many public companies. So I would also suggest, Horizon 2020 is still going on. Please do check. There is a very nice website where you can check all the available calls and tenders, in this respect. And in the future, Horizon Europe will ramp up. And LIFE, the LIFE program as well, it can also finance this type of project. And again, we are talking about more demonstration projects and sometimes deployment projects. LIFE is less research oriented and more deployment and demonstration oriented, but it can also target district heating and cooling for public companies.
Thank you, Nuno. It's right 5 to 3. So a last question to Chiara, but of course other speakers can reply. What do you see as the main challenges with a very interesting equity and lending-based crowdfunding? Are there any issues investing over country boundaries? Do you know any good crowdfunding platform with low commission? So that's also,
right.
Maybe
so
a conflict last year.
Well,
so yeah.
Well,
so if you
looks like a strong interest from someone, from a developer. So good. I just wanted to add something to the previous question. So crowdfunding could also help private investments in developers. For example, as I said before, in reducing the planning risk, because again, engagement of the local context can help in that sense. So let's go through all the questions. Any issues investing over country boundaries? We must say that crowdfunding is especially the financial models are very recent, and regulation in particular for equity is a national, at the moment are still national regulations, although the Commission is working on a European crowdfunding regulation, which means that at the moment I think this applies to every country in Europe, which at least the project you are developing has to be funded through crowdfunding platform of the same country where you are developing the project. Investments can be cross boundaries, but they tend, at the moment, they tend to be a fairly national dynamics. So if you look for a good crowdfunding platform with low commission, I'm not sure about commissions, but it's better to look for platforms in the country where you're looking for, where you're intending to develop your projects. And this probably relates also to your first question. So what are the main challenges? Potentially the main challenges are related to the engagement of people, so to the possibility of having the project actually funded through the campaign. So that's why I would say, especially in this context, I would say it's quite important to, especially for these heating projects and energy projects in general, which have this strong territorial characteristics, it's better to be placed to use a platform which knows the national context, if not the local context, and to do your to run your communication, the communication of your crowdfunding campaign at the national level, but also at the local level, because if your objective is to increase awareness of your specific project, that probably could be the way forward. I'm not sure I answered to the question, but.
Okay, so it's already 3. I would like to conclude with a very short keynote you know, sentence from you. If you would be, you know, if you would suggest to an investor to invest in district heating, which is the main, I would say, variable they should look at very quickly. So from the institutional point of view, Nuno, Kristina and Chiara from more academic and experienced expert, what do you suggest to an investor investing in district heating? You know, it's not an easy question, but you know, just really, you know, to look firstly to look to what, you know.
May I begin?
Yeah, please.
So I just want to say, if you're looking for green, you've come to the right place. So look at the green value. Yeah.
Okay. Would you suggest, Nuno, to an investor who want to invest in an innovative project? Okay, maybe you're not an expert exactly in district heating, but in energy, in the decarbonisation and clean energy. So, you know, you receive a lot of projects, for example, which is the variable you look at to a valuable project?
No, indeed, I'll tend to agree with Kristina. You know, nowadays I think we are moving more and more into impact investing, and indeed, and we have targets. For example, I had a slide with these targets under InvestEU. For example, 30% that should be spent at least, you know, in climate and energy, or 55 for climate and energy. And so, I mean, these projects more and more, and that's also the approach that we have followed with the Green Deal, is that they have to substantially contribute to sustainability impacts, you know. So I think this is a must, I think, nowadays. I think more and more we have to choose between projects that can deliver more and choose less projects that have less impact. So I think this is a very important. And then I would focus on the I mean, when it comes to innovation, risk, something innovative that is really, I mean, risky in a way, we have to promote, we have to be able to support things that are risky, that are disruptive, you know, because they can really change the market in the future. So I think these two components are indeed key for a project.
Okay, yeah, very quick.
I fully support. I would have said exactly the same in terms of look for green, look for sustainable, but I would add that as a second element, especially in this context, look for local impact. So, and I think it's important also for future resilience of our energy systems as well as economic systems, especially in this period of time, this moment. Yeah.
Thank you very much, you all. So the webinar is officially over, and I would like to remind you that, of course, the DHC Plus talks are not over. We have a weekly appointment for all of you locked down. Let's hope for not so long. So the next DHC Plus talk will focus on digital heat. It's another very, you know, important topic for district heat and cooling on 20th of May at the same time, so 2 p.m. Thank you again, and thank you the speakers and all the audience for follow until now. See you, and have a nice rest of the day. Bye bye.
Thank you, Gabriele. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.